the observer state of Palestine. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President, and our warm congratulations to Panama on assuming the presidency of the Security Council. Mr. President, I thank Assistant Secretary General Yansha for his briefing, and I acknowledge the testimony of Eli David and the distressing, unacceptable video of his brother digging his own grave. We reject all inhumane and degrading treatment against anyone, especially persons held in captivity. From day one, calls for a ceasefire have been launched by the Palestinian people in Gaza, and the families of hostages echoed across the world. Both were actually aware that this war would mean more death and agony for their loved ones. And I'm grateful for all of my colleagues, members of the Security Council, who have stressed the need for an immediate, continuous ceasefire. It saves lives. It releases hostages and Palestinian prisoners. It saves lives. It opens the doors and the crossings for humanitarian assistance. Stop the starvation of our people. It allows for the reconstruction of Gaza. It gives peace a possible chance. It gives all of us hope. I am very grateful for all of you who have stressed on these fundamental principles, and it is in your hands, since you are entrusted by the Charter of the UN to maintain international peace and security, to succeed in implementing your resolutions, and above all, to succeed in beginning with having an immediate ceasefire. Our call remains unchanged nearly 670 days later. End this Israeli war of massacres and starvation against our people. Release the hostages and prisoners. Enable immediate, unimpeded humanitarian aid to Gaza, including by the UN humanitarian system, including UNRWA, and secure full Israeli withdrawal from Gaza so that the Palestinian government can assume sole governance and security responsibilities with regional and international support, and we can begin immediately the recovery and reconstruction process based on the internationally endorsed Arab OIC plan and move towards finally ending this illegal occupation and achieving a just peace. Yet, in direct contradiction with the calls of Israeli hostages' families and by hundreds of former Israeli military leaders, what is Israel's answer to this worldwide call? Let's occupy all of Gaza. Let's annex Palestinian land. Let's displace the Palestinian people. Mr. President, the Israeli representative sent a letter calling on the Security Council to address violations of international law that need to be condemned. Speaking of abhorrent massacres of innocent civilians, of people being starved, tortured, and treated inhumanely, of how they appear emaciated, victims of starvation and abuse, not once realizing how much this description matches his own government's actions against an entire civilian population, the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip. And he concluded his letter saying, and I quote, "One must wonder who is really being starved in Gaza," end of quotation. a despicable denial of what is evident for all the world to see, and trying once again to use the plight of Israelis held captive to cover his government's crimes or to justify them. Mr. President, Israel is demanding the world to take a stance against starvation when it is actually starving an entire civilian population, when it is shooting at them while they seek water and food, with the most severe effects on the most vulnerable, with infants and children dying, and with those surviving, facing untold pain and trauma. It is demanding that the world take a stance against conditions of captivity of Israelis, when it is holding 2 million people captive under its deadly siege, when 76 Palestinian prisoners have died under torture or starving or due to medical neglect in the last 20 months alone, when there are videos of Israeli jailers raping, beating, and humiliating Palestinian prisoners, when the world has seen the images of hundreds of Palestinians arrested, men and boys, placed almost naked on trucks and taken away, several of them having disappeared since, when 10,000 Palestinians languish in Israeli jails, thousands of them under administrative detention, the most arbitrary form of detention, when hundreds of our children remain detained, when Israel has held prisoners over 1 million Palestinians since the onset of the occupation 58 years ago, when it has held the remains of Palestinians for years and decades. Mr. President, the killing of civilians is unacceptable in all circumstances. Let me repeat. The killing of civilians, all civilians, is unacceptable in all circumstances. The killing of children is unacceptable in all circumstances. We should not tolerate harming or killing a single child, regardless of what nationality or faith they adhere to. Those who need to ask what is the nationality or faith of the perpetrator and of the victim to decide if you are outraged or not should go check their humanity. Torture and ill treatment of those held captive are unacceptable under any circumstances. It cannot be justified in some cases and condemned in others. Israel says the videos of Ron and Abiyatar are unacceptable means of pressure, and they are, just as when it has abducted thousands of civilians as bargaining chips, and when it is starving millions of civilians as a method of pressure, as its leaders have confessed before finding a new narrative given the international outcry. Mr. President, when Israel says this is a war of civilization against barbarism, it means that its barbaric acts have to be condoned because the perpetrators are Israelis and the victims are Palestinians. It does not even see the irony of it, resorting to such images that have been used and abused by colonial powers who claimed to represent civilization against barbarism to justify their atrocities. That is why Israel's foreign minister fails to grasp how his moral lessons to the rest of the world, scolding his closest allies, explaining that they should act according to his own very peculiar view of the law and humanity, sound totally tone deaf, are a source of worldwide contempt for him and his government. But as we reject selective outrage, we should not practice it ourselves. We oppose and reject all attacks against civilians, whether Palestinians or Israelis. There is nothing that justifies harming civilians or those no longer taking part in hostilities. You cannot justify it by calling them terrorists, and you cannot justify it by saying they are occupiers. The rules of international law must be upheld by all and for all to preserve our shared humanity. Mr. President, allow me to address the Israeli people. Your government wants you to believe that the whole world is conspiring against you, that the Palestinian people are terrorists, that the UN is filled with terrorists and terrorist supporters, that your closest allies are your enemies. This most radical Israeli government and its foreign minister are calling for, and I quote, de-radicalization, end of quotation, of the Palestinian society as a whole, calling them, and I quote, human animals, and quote, children of darkness. They want you to believe that your survival depends on your ability to continuously wage wars, including against a defenseless civilian population, half of whom are children in their erasure. 1 million Palestinian children in the Gaza Strip. The Israeli people need to decide if this is what they want their government and military doing. These atrocities that the whole world is watching and that your government is hoping you will filter out, deny, or justify. In the midst of this genocide, we are telling you, you choose peace and appeal to you. We choose peace and appeal to you to do the same. We do it for our children and our people. You should do it for your children and your loved ones. Enough bloodshed, enough wars, enough suffering, enough occupation. Enough bloodshed, enough wars, enough suffering, enough occupation. We are clear. What Israel did before the 7th of October cannot justify harming Israeli civilians on the 7th of October. And what Hamas did on the 7th of October cannot justify harming Palestinian civilians ever since. There is no justification for the killing of over 60,000 Palestinians, including nearly 20,000 children, the maiming of 200,000 Palestinians, the forced displacement and starvation of 2 million Palestinians, and the total destruction of Gaza. As there is no justification for the killing of more than 1,000 Palestinians in the West Bank in attacks by Israeli occupation forces and Israeli settler terrorists, or for the forced displacement of 40,000 Palestinians and destructions of their homes and refugee camps. The Israeli government is promising you that the solution is more occupation, more oppression, more displacement, more colonization, more killing, a recipe that has failed for 8 decades. Do not believe them. Do not believe them. If not for the Palestinian people's sake, for your own. If not in the name of humanity, in the name of self-preservation. The solution is ending this illegal occupation and ending this disastrous conflict. It is the realization of the independence and sovereignty of the Palestinian state, not its destruction. It is the fulfillment of our rights, not their continued denial. It is respect for international law, not its trampling. It is the implementation of the two-state solution, not a one-state reality with Palestinians condemned to genocide, ethnic cleansing, or apartheid. Mr. President, the international conference co-chaired by Saudi Arabia and France and attended by around 185 states with the active participation of 120 of them, has charted an irreversible path to peace. In the midst of all these tragedies and the pain that we all endured, the international conference sent a clear message. There is an alternative way. There is an alternative way. All of you who participated in the conference and deliberated the outcome document and the annex, you made a loud and clear statement. There is an alternative way. There is a possibility of peace. Palestinians are not destined to forever endure occupation, displacement, and dispossession. And Palestinians and Israelis are not doomed to be at eternal war. By ending complicity and advancing compliance, by ending impunity, upholding accountability, by breaking the cycle of violence instead of fueling it, by rejecting violence instead of justifying them, by implementing the two-state solution instead of watching it to be destroyed, are the only alternative. Perpetual conflict is the only alternative is perpetual conflict. The conference identified the required actions by the parties and the states around the world in line with international law, the relevant UN resolutions and the ICJ 2024 landmark advisory opinion to achieve just and lasting peace that will lead to regional integration and security. Palestine endorsed the international conference declaration and annex, while Israel boycotted it. Mr. President, there are only two parties who link the latest wave of recognition of the state of Palestine to the 7th of October against facts and reason. The Israeli government, in order to deter Western governments from such recognition, and Hamas in order to take credit for it. The reality is that more countries are recognizing the state of Palestine in support of its enduring commitment to liberation through peaceful means. As reaffirmed yet again in President Abbas' letter to President Macron and Crown Prince bin Salman in support of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people to self-determination, in support of the two-state solution that requires an independent and sovereign Palestinian state, and yes, also in response to Israel's attempts to destroy that state through the destruction of Gaza and the colonization of the West Bank, through the forced transfer of our people and the annexation of our land. Such recognition is thus in support of our rights and of peace. I repeat, our rights, the Palestinian rights, and of peace, of an independent Palestine living side by side in peace and security with Israel based on the relevant UN resolutions. But since this Israeli government does not want peace, opposes a Palestinian state and the two-state solution, its opposition to such recognition is expected, and using argument such that supporting the two-state solution is supporting terror is also expected, regardless how absurd such a claim is. Peace starts with ending the war in Gaza. Let me repeat, peace starts with ending the war in Gaza. Peace will prevail once Palestinian rights are fulfilled and the Palestinian state is independent. We are ready to work with the US administration, Saudi Arabia, which showed leadership for Palestinian rights and peace, France, which made the right, courageous decision to recognize the state of Palestine, and all countries who wish to see freedom, justice, and peace prevail to finally achieve what some want us to believe is impossible. Peace in the Middle East, it's not impossible. We have to work for it. It is the only alternative to war, to destruction, to hostages, to prisoners, to pain, to death, to starvation. Which one is nicer? Peace is much nicer than war and destruction. Peace saves lives, release hostages, release prisoners, give our children and their children hope. Peace is what the world wants. Peace is the business of the Security Council to make sure that the maintenance of international peace and security. That is the alternative. For those who think there is no alternative, no, war is not the alternative. Peace is the alternative. A peace for all peoples and all states. A peace that can unleash the unbelievable potential of this region. A peace that saves lives today and achieves shared peace, security, and prosperity tomorrow. The time we waste is measured in human lives, and we are out of time. This Council and the international community as a whole have a duty to act, and to act now. Not a single minute more should be wasted. Thank you, Mr. President.
Agradezco.